Ben Mezrich, where did you find the story of the accidental billionaires?
That one actually came at random, a random email, 2 in the morning. I was sitting at home, and it was a Harvard student, and he said, my best friend co-founded Facebook, and no one's ever heard of him. Out of the blue. And I had heard of Facebook. I knew what Facebook was.
When was this?
This was, wow, it had to have been, it gets all mixed up because of the Social Network movie. I guess about 2 years before the movie came out. So 2008 or so. It was right before 21 came out, the movie 21. And so the email was, out of the blue, and my wife had forced me to be on Facebook, so I knew what Facebook was, but it was just something I used to look at parties I wasn't invited to. And so I went out for a drink with this guy, and it was Eduardo Saverin, who Andrew Garfield played in the movie, and he was angry. He was really angry and a little drunk, and he wanted to tell me a story, and that's how I got into it.
Why did he send an email to you?
Well, I've become kind of the go-to guy for every college kid who does something ridiculous or crazy. Because of my books, I guess they have a big college audience, and these kids want to tell their story. And so I've kind of become that guy that when someone, knocks over a lottery, scam or whatever it is, they'll call me. So I get 30 or 40 of these a week. This was just one of them, and usually they're lame. They're not something I'd want to do, but this was one that really caught my eye.
So you went out, had drinks with Eduardo.
So I go out for drinks with Eduardo and his buddy Will. Will was the one who sent me the email, who was a senior at college at Harvard. And Eduardo started to tell me this story, and I knew nothing about how Facebook had been founded. And he started to tell me that he and his best friend had met in an underground Jewish fraternity. It was Mark Zuckerberg, who of course we'd all heard of. And they were kind of geeky guys. They weren't great at meeting girls. Eduardo wanted to be a member of one of the finals clubs at Harvard, which are they're old world, semi-secret, all-male institutions like the Skull and Bones at Yale. And he wanted to be a member. Mark really didn't have a shot at being a member. And Eduardo got into one of the finals clubs. And Mark went on a really bad date, got dumped, and when he got home, he hacked into all the computers at Harvard and pulled up pictures of every girl on campus and made a website. I think it was called, it was like a hot or not website. It was called Face Mash. And it was, you could pick the hottest girl at Harvard. And it was like a prank. It leaked out over the internet, and everyone at Harvard logged in at the same time, and it crashed Harvard's computer servers. And he became notorious on campus for that. And that was kind of the beginning, in a lot of ways, of Facebook. And that's when he caught the attention of the Winklevoss twins, who you could not invent if you wanted to. I mean, they are right out of a Hollywood, playbook. When I met those guys, they're 6'5", identical twin Olympic rowers. Really good looking. They were the cool kids on campus. I remember meeting them in a hotel in New York for the first time, and it was Cameron, or it might have been Tyler. I don't know. I mean, they look the same. You really can't tell. And he was like, you look at us and you think we must be the bad guys. Because if this were an 80s movie, we'd be dressed up in skeleton costumes chasing the Karate Kid around the gym, right? Which is the line I put in the book, and then Sorkin put it in the movie. And when the movie came out, I got a call from...
the movie, of course, is the Social
Network. Ralph Macchio called me out of the blue and said, the original Karate Kid, and was saying that he loved that line was back in, in vogue. But they saw Mark in the newspaper after this prank, and they tried to hire him as their geek because they were working on their own website, which was called the Harvard Connection, which was a dating site for Harvard men. It was to help women meet Harvard men. Harvard guys spend a lot of time trying to figure out ways to help women meet Harvard guys. And so they needed a computer programmer, and they hired Mark. Mark just wanted to hang out with them because they were like the cool kids on campus, but he didn't really think much of their idea. And that's essentially around the time he came up with the idea of Facebook. And he went to his friend Eduardo and said, if you put up the money, I'll create the company, you'll be CFO, and you can have 30% of the company. And that's where it began. It was just 2 college kids. And then Mark wrote Facebook. He created it from there.
So, Ben Mezrich, from the time of that email to the publication of your book, how much time passed? And what kind of research did you do?
Well, things got really crazy. What happened was I hung out with Eduardo and all the people that I needed. It was about a 6-month process of interviewing and things like that. And then I wrote a book proposal, and it was this 14-page book proposal.
Is that a short book proposal or is that a long
You know,
book
for me
proposal?
in my career, I've had so many different ones. At this point in my career, I think that's about, you know, it's a little short. I think 20-page book proposal for me is what I try and do. But sometimes the story can be told very quickly, and I think this one, you know, with all the Shakespearean tones of two friends ripped apart, it was a pretty simple thing. I wrote the book proposal. I remember telling Kevin Spacey and Dana Brunetti, who were my production people at Trigger Street, about it. And I think it was Dana who said, you know, Facebook, does anybody really want to make a movie about Facebook? And that was my mom's first impression as well. But I wasn't, you know, writing the book yet. I had just written the proposal. And then the proposal leaked out on the internet. And
how did that happen, do you think?
well, it's a good question. I mean, it went out to a bunch of publishers. So I'm guessing somebody, either one of the publishers who didn't get it, or somebody at a publishing house, or a scout. I mean, I don't know. It was the first time I'd ever seen a book proposal in its entirety printed on the web.
And was it accurate?
Oh, it was the exact, I mean, it was photocopied. It was the book proposal. And things went crazy because, first of all, Eduardo wasn't supposed to be talking to me. So it was kind of this, you know, he freaked out. I got a restraining order from his lawyer saying, Ben Mezrich is no longer allowed to contact me. From what I understand, Facebook quickly settled with him so he'd stop talking to me, and they gave him what I've heard was 5% of Facebook, which is an enormous amount of money, but he had to sign a contract which says he would never speak to Ben Mezrich again. You know, for 5% of Facebook, I'd never speak to Ben Mezrich again either. And then at the same time, Aaron Sorkin and Scott Rudin saw what I was doing, and immediately Sorkin wanted to write this, which is an incredible phone call for a movie, which is a great phone call to get as an author. And I hadn't written the book yet; I was just working on it, yeah. So things all happened in kind of a day, and then I quickly, you know, worked on the book and finished it up. I had been talking to Mark's people, to Facebook, for a good 6 months. I spent a year trying to get Mark to talk to me. I really wanted to get his point of view. I really wanted to sit down with him. He didn't want to, you know, which is perfectly fair. He knew...
Have you met Mark Zuckerberg?
No, I know Sheryl Sandberg, who's the COO there, and who's wonderful. I've met, you know, a number of people there. Mark and I have never met. He didn't like me very much when the book came out. You know, I think he called me, or his company called me, the Jackie Collins of Silicon Valley, I think was the quote. Which is great. Listen, Jackie Collins, you know, she sells a lot of books. This is not the story that Mark would ever have wanted to tell. You know, his story would not necessarily have contained Eduardo. He would not have talked about the Winklevoss twins. And, you know, to his credit, Mark is the one who created Facebook. He's the genius behind it. And I completely understand why he wouldn't want to talk to an author who he couldn't control. I'm not a journalist that, you know, I'm not that kind of a journalist where he could tell me how he wants the book written. And I was already talking to people who he didn't want to be a part of the story. So that was really the reason, I think, why he wouldn't talk to me. It would have been great if he had talked to me. You know, I would have loved to have gotten his point of view. However, I was able to build the story. There were thousands of pages of court documents, depositions, everything you could possibly imagine. There were dozens of people to talk to, both in and outside of Facebook, and I managed to get to just about everybody in the story, except for Mark. So it was something I could build around not being able to talk to him.
Well, that was the second movie made out of your books, the first being 21, the book Bringing Down the House.
Right, Bringing Down the House. Yeah, that was the big one for me. That was kind of my first nonfiction book.
And again, where did you find this story?
Well, again, I mean, it makes me sound like someone who doesn't really do anything, but I was hanging out at a bar, really. I had been writing fiction, trashy. Some of them were good. I enjoyed writing them, but they were medical thrillers, sci-fi kind of things, really pop fiction. I had written a book for the X-Files television show. I had written a book that became a TV movie starring Antonio Sabato Jr. of Melrose Place, the underwear model, who's great. And I think Robert Wagner was the bad guy. It was one of those, it still airs on the Sci-Fi Channel at like 2 in the morning. It's a pretty funny movie. But anyways, I had been writing that kind of thing. And I was hanging out with these guys from MIT, and they were these geeky math science guys, mostly Asian. They looked like everyone else at MIT, except they had tons of money, and it was always in $100 bills. And we hung out at this bar called Crossroads, which is a bar in Boston, which is kind of an MIT dive bar. And you never see $100 bills in Boston. So it's weird. I mean, in New York you see them, In Vegas, they come out of the, you know, the ATM machines. I don't know about DC, but you just don't see them in Boston. And so